In Revenge of the Sith, the temple burns, the clones turn, and a hidden emperor closes his fist. But what if they weren't alone? What if, when the sky fell, a person who wore their history like armor stepped in between the blade and the neck? In this version of the story, the Mandalorians do not stay on the sidelines, and nothing unfolds the same way. Let's begin. The night before the purge, Coruscant hums like any other city that never sleeps. In a quiet barracks room above the traffic lanes, Anakin Skywalker jolts awake. The dream is the same. Padmé on a cold bed, a pressure in the Force like a fist closing. He reaches for air that won't come. A voice cuts through the panic, low, steady, and old. Skywalker, this path ends in fire. Step off it. He doesn't see a face, only the impression of a masked figure on stony ground, wind scraping a dead plane. Concordia. A word arrives in his mind like a beacon. Then the vision thins and the room is a room again, lights dim, engines outside like distant surf. He sits a long time and decides to ask the council for leave. He calls it meditation. Technically, it won't be a lie. By daybreak, Mace Windu has already sent a different message, the kind the Order rarely uses. A recall, high priority, council, and a handful of trusted masters only. War or not, he wants them back on Coruscant. He knows a confrontation with the Chancellor is coming. He wants the temple ready for whatever follows. Across the city, Anakin tells Obi-Wan he needs space to clear his head. Obi-Wan studies his former Padawan for a few beats and nods because he remembers a boy who used to say the same thing before hard battles. "All right, don't go far." Anakin promises nothing without saying anything and heads to his starfighter. Concordia greets him with wind that tastes like metal. The plain below looks flayed, veins of strip mines where grasslands should be. He senses a hollow ache in the ground and almost stumbles. A figure stands a dozen paces away, cloaked, masked, quiet in the way cliffs are quiet. "You know the stories," the figure says. "You don't know what they feel like." "Who are you?" Anakin asks. "A voice that learned too late," the stranger answers. "Call me Revan if you need a name." The title lands like a stone in Anakin's stomach. Jedi histories whisper that name with equal measures of awe and caution. He ignites nothing. The stranger does the same. They walk the scarred field and speak of balance like it's something you hold, not something you choose once and call done, about using power without letting it use you. The lesson is simple and hard. Anakin listens because, for once, the fear in his chest eases instead of growing teeth. He leaves Concordia changed in a way that doesn't show on his face. He heads for Bo-Katan Kryze's signal because Ahsoka Tano has asked for help, and because a war is still happening even when you feel centered for 5 minutes. Sundari's domes glint as the gunships drop from orbit. Ahsoka and Rex greet him on the deck with the hard relief of soldiers who have already counted him as late. Behind them, Bo-Katan's night owls adjust jetpacks and check gauntlet rockets like any people who plan to get close to danger on purpose. They don't ask about the extra cloaked figure who stepped out of Anakin's ship. He gives no name, only a nod. His presence lands heavy in the Force, a pressure that says not friend, not enemy, simply here. There's no time to ask questions. Maul's loyalists hold ground in the lower works. The 332nd advances, orange helmets flowing like a tide through the ducts and catwalks of a city built in order. Ahsoka moves at the point with blades that never look hurried. Anakin takes a side corridor and draws fire away. The masked stranger walks through blaster volleys like rain, a purple blade carving arcs that seem to arrive before his body does. Even the Mandalorians slow to watch him work. When the last lance of red dies, Bo-Katan reports the palace secured and the Prime Minister in binders. News from Coruscant crackles in on the next breath. Obi-Wan has moved against Grievous. The Chancellor's name sits too comfortably beside Dooku's in a dozen reports. Everything starts pressing inward at once. Windu's recall starts to bear fruit. Yoda hands Kashyyyk to Quinlan Vos and lifts for space. Plo Koon breaks off patrol. Daiba Bilaba aborts transit to the outer rim. Masters across the lanes angle toward the core. The pattern looks like a net tightening, which is the precise moment the galaxy tears. Order 66 hits like a chord struck through the clone network, a note so deep it scratches bone. On Sundry's command platform, Rex's fingers tighten. He takes a breath, then another, and something inside catches on a memory he can't place. A friend whose designation was a number and a warning both. 5s. His blaster drifts toward Ahsoka and he sees his own hands shake. "No," he whispers, and the word becomes a shout. "Find 5s!" He wrenches his aim up and a bolt scorches the ceiling. The squad around him hesitates just long enough for Ahsoka to close and twist. The blaster goes one way, Rex another. A beat later, he's on his knees, helmet off, eyes wet and wild. "It's not us," he says, voice breaking. "It's in us." All over Sundari, clones turn on Jedi and Mandalorian alike. Bo-Katan doesn't wait for a philosophy of it. She plants her feet and opens fire on the gunships dropping into the lower wards. Her people answer in kind. The 330-second splits down the middle, some pulled by a command they can't name, some pulled by the captain they've followed through too many doors. Ahsoka knocks a barrage back into a carrier and hauls Rex by the arm. "Stay with me." He does, jaw locked, as if any step that isn't beside her will become a fall. On Coruscant, the temple steps fill with white armor. The blue blade at their head is a wound Obi-Wan recognizes before he sees the face behind it. He lands hard at the base of the stairs because there's no other place to stand. He opens his mouth. Anakin answers with motion. Their sabers clash and the world narrows until only balance, breath, and the edge of a decision exist. Inside, what should have been a slaughter turns into a siege. The recall worked just enough. Ki-Adi-Mundi slams a blast door and buys a hallway of younglings for 3 minutes. Shak-Ti stands in a hurricane of bolts and moves like water around stone until the last of her Padawans slip through a maintenance shaft. Depa Billaba catches the hand of a child too shocked to run and pulls him into motion. Plo Koon and Yoda fight back-to-back in the Great Hall. Bail Organa's pilots punch a clearance corridor above the roofline, Alderaanian transponders forcing lanes to respect a priority, not on any controller's list. Sectors still fall. Clones drop through skylights on harpoon lines and open fire from angles the defenders haven't held in 1,000 years. Then a different thunder rolls. 2 gunships in old Mandalorian colors slip under the balconies, doors open, night owls on the skids. Jetpacks flare under vaulted ceilings. Beskar slams plastoid. A corridor snarls with grapples snapping onto pillars. Ahsoka drops from a hatch and lands in a ring of white. Rex flanks her, aiming as steady as it was an hour ago but pointed the other way. "Get the younglings!" she shouts to the Mandalorians, and somehow the sentence makes perfect sense in the oldest building the Republic ever built. Back on the steps, Obi-Wan's heel finds the edge of a shattered riser. Anakin presses. "You can't win," he says, voice raw. "You never understood what I'm trying to save." "Then tell me," Obi-Wan answers, parrying high and stepping inside the next cut. "Tell me, and stop hiding behind a man who calls himself your friend." For an instant, the mask slips. Fear looks out of eyes that used to hold only heat. The next exchange leaves both bleeding. A ricochet throws sparks into Obi-Wan's face. He stumbles, hands on stone. A shadow falls. A blue blade descends. Depa hits Anakin from the blind side, and they collide in a crash of hilts that sends all 3 to the tiles. She rolls to her knees, one hand out, and the Force binds Anakin to the ground like he just stepped into a swamp that wants him kept. "Enough," she says, and in that word is a teacher's disappointment and a general's command. The temple's western hangar becomes an artery that pumps life. Mandalorian gunships ride the edge of the domes. Younglings clatter up boarding ramps clutching training helms. Knights arrive carrying wounded masters. Asajj Ventress, alive in this branch of the story, her fatal mission never taking shape, stands in a doorway with twin curved hilts and a look that says anyone who thinks they know her story is 3 chapters behind. When a Coruscant Guard-heavy team fires a rocket down the bay, she flicks her wrist and the warhead buries itself in a bulkhead that doesn't matter. "On!" she snaps, and a line that would have hiccuped moves. Some escapes don't happen, some do and shouldn't. Across the plaza, blue lightning snarls into a transport's engines and turns 300 souls into vapor and ash. The scream of metal reads as grief even to people who don't feel the force. On the steps, the Chancellor stands with his hands slightly raised, face composed. Plo and Yoda turn toward him together. They don't kill him. He doesn't kill them. It isn't the day for final things. Their clash chews the air with ozone and tears, flagstones and long scars. Guards trained to stand until death take 3 steps back without realizing they've moved. When the transports finally lift, one burning, one whole. The 2 Jedi break contact and vanish into a city that knows 1,000 places to hide anything. By dawn, the order is shattered, but not gone. The difference is Mandalore. Bo-Katan broadcasts a declaration before her advisors can suggest a softer phrase. Open amnesty for Jedi on Mandalorian soil, she says, chin high before a bank of holo-recorders. We are not the Empire's hounds. We are Mandalore. The last sentence hits the rim like a flare. Jedi trickle in, then arrive in groups covertly ferried under false manifests. Eth Koth, no longer of the Order, limps into Sundari behind a woman in a hooded cloak who smirks when anyone calls her assassin and shrugs when anyone calls her ally. Ahsoka bows in the throne room and doesn't kneel. Bo-Katan nods back. You're not my subject, she says. You're my guest. The compact they write fits on one data page and is heavy enough to bend the map. Mandalore grants sanctuary and a place to rebuild, one temple, small and spare, under the dome. In return, the Jedi help Mandalore do more than survive. They help it become something besides a nation that remembers war like it's a religion. Part diplomacy, part training, part refusal to let the Empire define every conversation. Not everyone signs. Helmeted Orthodox coverts remain apart, faces never shown, creeds never softened. Other clans sign because the Empire is worse than a rival, and because the Jedi teach their young ones to breathe before they swing, and because a night owl who once thought Jedi were soft watched a temple guard in Beskar meet a stormtrooper charge like a wall that can move. Ventress, who never belonged anywhere that lasted, builds a school with no name that produces shadows who leave no footprint. She shows Mandalorian scouts how to listen to a room and steal a sentence without anyone hearing it. The new Mandalorian sentinels march in black and gold beside Jedi in unadorned robes laced with light plates. Their pikes hum with a steady charge. Their oaths sound like both creeds at once. Protect the weak. End a fight before you start one. If you must start it, finish it. The Empire notices. Palpatine doesn't move fleets first. He moves whispers. Credits slip into old armories. Voices nostalgia slick tell stories about the days when fear of a visor bent worlds. Death Watch banners, folded under floorboards, find daylight. A coup blooms under Sundari like mold in damp heat. It hits on a market day. Explosions tear a subway corridor. Warriors in old blue step through smoke and hit the palace stairs, yelling phrases that used to win arguments. No more Jedi chains! Beskar slams Beskar. Bo-Katan holds a stare with 36 night owls and 100 militia who learned to shoot last month and haven't learned to be afraid. The temple doors open and a double file of sentinels pours out, shields up, pikes locked. The fight is brutal and brief. The rebels know every service tunnel, but they brought knives to a problem that needed more than edge. The sentinels don't break ranks. The Jedi don't grandstand. By nightfall, banners come down and the city is still Mandalorian. The cost is real. Supply corridors cut. Trade partners stop answering hails. A dozen worlds that were almost ready to sign drift back into silence. Palpatine tests the perimeter with something that looks like weather. Satellites unfurl over desert and plain, emitters humming a note that makes teeth ache. Storms build and hold. In orbit, Star Destroyers drift like patient knives, turbo lasers timed to punch at power grids when the lightning pauses. Bo-Katan doesn't wait to be starved behind glass. Open the gates, she orders. Highness, the winds. Open them. Sundari's seals lift. Rain and grit test the transparent steel for a breath and rush. Jetpacks roar into the storm. The city's defenders leave the dome because fighting under a sky that wants you dead is better than waiting while someone else turns your air into a weapon. Sentinels advance in cadres, shields tight, pikes thrusting like a heartbeat in rain. Koth wears a single plate of Beskar over his chest and moves like a man who remembers practice well enough to trust it. Ahsoka rides the edge of a ramp and directs flights through crosswinds that try to erase plans. Rex sits strapped to the opposite rail with a fresh scar under his right eye and a dull ache where a chip used to whisper. While the ground fight rages, Ventress takes 4 shadows and a Mandalorian slicer into the belly of the lead destroyer. Their boots barely touch deck plates on the way to the data core. 2 red blades boil out of a doorway above. Inquisitors, new zeal wearing old hate. Ventress smiles without showing teeth. "I remember when your masters had better posture," she says, and meets the first strike with a lazy parry that makes mockery look graceful. Ahsoka arrives a breath later in a slide that ends in the heart of the second duel. White meets red under strobes. The fight is short and decisive. Ventress breathes out easy and flicks blood from a blade that never learned mercy. Mandos lock the weather array into feedback. Lightning crawls over the destroyer's shields like an animal finally turned loose. The bow dips. Alarms climb toward a pitch only dogs can hear. The Shadow Team plants charges and runs. Down below, the storm breaks. Sun cuts through in hard-edged sheets. Guides. Gunships rise into air that remembers how to hold them. "Now," Bo-Katan says, and every squad that can fly does. The counterattack is quick and cruel. Imperial pods burn in streets that will carry their scorch marks a generation. Survivors drop weapons and raise hands because the alternative is worse. Because the world has been watching. Mandalorian relays shunt holofeeds to places that haven't trusted news in years. Weather machines first, then shields opening against deliberate rain, then a destroyer, its belly burning the color of confession. Senators who made peace with necessary measures start using softer words. Governors with imperial advisors stop returning calls. Alderaan announces that ships bearing the Owl Sigil pass any checkpoint. Chandrila stops stamping crates bound for Sundari with codes the Empire can trace. Mon Cala sends a delegation that smells like salt and true offers. An alliance taking shape doesn't have a title yet. It has work. Rex finds what he needs to name what nearly killed him. Fives file surfaces via a sympathetic medtech on Coruscant, whose brother once checked a chip's checksum, because clean numbers soothed him. The recording plays for Bo-Katan and Ahsoka, and then for senators who still remember when testimony mattered. A surgical team sets up in a public ward and starts taking chips out with tools that look like patients. Clones line the hallway. Some cry before the anesthetic. Some after. There are 2 wars now, one with pikes, rockets, sabers, one with paper, juries, whispers in doorways of planets that would like to survive what's coming. It can't hold forever. The Alliance knows it. The Empire does too. So there's a push. It isn't a battle plan so much as a refusal to keep playing on someone else's board. Mandalorian ships with stolen transponders, credits to Ventress, drift into the Coruscant lanes looking like bulk carriers half an hour late. That is the camouflage. Ahsoka rides one, Koth rides another. Bo-Katan stays home because someone has to. Rex comes because he refuses not to. He wears no badge and the scar on his temple shows like a banner. The goal isn't assassination. The goal is sunlight. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma open a Senate session that starts like theater and turns into a trial when the first holopad lights. Fives speaks without knowing the world finally listens. Clones in balcony seats shift and look at their hands like strangers. The lights dim and rise on images of weather satellites over a domed city and a destroyer's shadow falling where it shouldn't. Palpatine sits in the central rostrum with an expression a stone would envy. "An attempt," he says, voice smooth, "to turn necessity into sin." The Mandalorian team doesn't try to carve a path to him through a chamber that still remembers being a republic. They secure the sub-level feeding the holo projectors. They make sure every image plays without stutter and every timecode matches. Ahsoka intercepts a detachment of blue-robed guards and disarms them with movements that look like dancing only if you've never seen her angry. Koth bars a door with his body and a bar because some moments don't ask for mysticism. Palpatine moves when the floor tilts under him. Not fast, not slow. The way a man rises when he thinks gravity will still be there tomorrow. He smiles and all the old words come back. Treason, insurrection, outside agitators. The guards look uneasy for the first time since they were boys. Then he raises one hand and the air sours with a feeling every Jedi knows like breath. Lightning crawls toward the microphones. The purple blade that catches it appears so quickly it seems to have been there all along. The masked stranger from Concordia steps into the light like a memory deciding to be present. "You aren't the first," he says, driving backward with his free hand. The energy rolls like a sheet and carves a line in the floor tiles that will never polish out. Anakin arrives a heartbeat later, face clear in a way Obi-Wan hasn't seen in years. He doesn't announce anything. He simply meets red with blue in a room built for words. It isn't a duel for operas. It is quick and ugly. Palpatine is very good at what he does. He lashes out with arcs that don't bother with elegance. The masked exile, who may or may not be the Revan of legend, answers with economy. Anakin hesitates once and almost drowns. He remembers a dead plane and a voice saying, "Power is a tide, you don't have to let carry you." He breathes. Focus arrives instead of static. The Chancellor takes a cut at the knee because even monsters lose track of edge when confronted by two people who refuse to break. He doesn't die. That isn't the point. He is bound and carried not to a cell no one sees, but to the middle of the floor he called his own. When the cuffs lock, a sound like wind moves through the chamber. Some senators stand, some weep, some look at their hands like the clones an hour ago. Mon Mothma's voice doesn't wobble. "Inhibitor chips," she says evenly. "Unlawful orders, unconscionable weapons. This Senate will not be ruled by terror cloaked in procedure." They vote to suspend emergency powers pending investigation. They vote to appoint a committee of people Palpatine used to call naive, and now calls something worse under his breath. Guards lead him away down a hallway that was supposed to be safe for men like him forever. The empire that hadn't been born finds itself strangled in its crib. The child still kicks. It will for years. It just won't grow into the exact monster it wanted to be. Mandalore doesn't fill the vacuum. It fills its own boots. In the months that follow, the Mandalorian Protectorate begins to mean something on maps. Conquered Dawn signs on and paints new crests over old stains. Kalevala throws its garrison into space and hangs owl banners on its civic hall. Sentinels train detachments from worlds that haven't fought under one flag since the first time the stars looked like invitations. Surviving Jedi teach in rooms without pillars as tall as their pride used to be. They talk about discipline and mercy in the same class, about attachment without calling love a disease, about fear without telling children to be ashamed when they feel it. Ventress vanishes between jobs and keeps appearing when a data lock refuses a code that would make everyone's life easier. She drinks twice with a night owl who has decided living long enough to retire would be a nice change. They don't say friend, but a joke they share stops being cruel halfway through, the first time either laughs. Rex runs the chip removal clinics with an efficiency only soldiers love. He and his brothers, even the ones who don't remember him the same way, find work that isn't killing. Some sign with planetary defense forces that liked the way they held a line when the wind turned. Some go home to places they've only seen in personnel files. Some stay on Mandalore because they like the feel of a people who say creed out loud and mean it. Obi-Wan doesn't vanish into sand. He stays where he can do what he's always done. Show stubborn kids how to turn attention into a talent. Ahsoka teaches alongside him and laughs when he gets too serious. Yoda's voice is a thin thread in halls that echo with new languages. He visits seldom and sits long, leaving cups of tea half-finished and children who say they learned patience because the old green one listened more than he spoke. As for Anakin, he does not wear black. He doesn't become what the dreams promised. He doesn't slide back into the Order either. He stands on a ledge between old vows and new work and finds a life there. Padmé gives birth in a clinic that doesn't report to any registry the Empire controls. The twins cry like every new thing cries, and then stare up with expressions it would be easy to read too much into. He visits when he can and leaves because necessary things still pull at him like tides do the moon. The masked exile does not take a chair, much less a throne. He leaves the day after the Senate session with no forwarding address. Some say he walked into a temple in the desert and let the wind take him. Some say he never existed, that the mind invents mentors when it needs them. Anakin smiles when asked and changes the subject. Bo-Katan, who has no patience for mysticism, simply says, "Whoever he was, he did the job and he left. That'll do." Years later, a training hall on Sundari rings with practice pikes. A sentinel corrects a grip with a tap and steps back. A small boy frowns at his hands, fixes them, and moves again. In a quieter courtyard, a simple stone sits under a sapling leaning into the sun. Names are carved on its face: Masters and Padawans, Mandalorians and clones. The list isn't neat. It doesn't try to be. On a balcony above the street, Bo-Katan looks out over a city that still shows scorch marks if you know where to look. She doesn't smile. She looks satisfied. "We are still here," she says, not to anyone in particular. "We are," Ahsoka answers at her shoulder. "And them?" Bo-Katan asks, meaning a government learning to breathe again without one voice telling it when. "They'll argue," Ahsoka says. "That's good." Bo-Katan tilts her head. "And if the storm comes back?" "We'll open the gates," Ahsoka says, and neither adds that Mandalore doesn't hide anymore. What if the Mandalorians helped the Jedi during Order 66? In this timeline, they did. It didn't make the galaxy simple. It made it possible. A warrior creed met a quiet one, and they built something that bends without breaking. The Empire tried to speak fear forever and found fewer ears willing to listen. The Jedi learned to be guardians without pretending to be statues. Mandalore remembered what strength is for. If you enjoyed this alternate path, there are more doors to open. Until next time, walk in balance, keep your word, and on the days when the wind rises, remember you're not alone.